I'm Dr. Ellen Langer. We are taught from a very young age to believe that age is a fixed fact, something objective and unchangeable, stamped onto us by time and confirmed by a birth certificate. That number becomes a quiet authority over our lives. It tells us what we should be capable of, what we should fear, and when we should begin to decline. But science has begun to show us something deeply unsettling and profoundly empowering. The number on your birth certificate may describe how long you have existed, but it does not accurately define how old you are. Age, as we commonly understand it, is largely a psychological construct. We confuse time past with aging itself, yet research consistently demonstrates that our minds play a central role in how our bodies function. When people believe they are old, they act old. They move less, expect less from themselves, and interpret normal sensations as signs of decline. These expectations quietly shape behavior, posture, memory, and even physiology. In many ways, aging is something we do, not something that simply happens to us. In controlled studies, when individuals are placed in environments that encourage them to think, speak, and behave as if they were younger, measurable changes occur. Strength improves, flexibility increases, vision sharpens, memory becomes clearer. These are not metaphors, these are physical changes. The body responds to the mind's interpretation of reality. When the mind changes its assumptions, the body follows. This suggests that what we call age is not a single biological truth, but a dynamic process influenced by attention, belief, and context. Your birth certificate does not record your curiosity, your adaptability, or your engagement with life. It does not measure how present you are, how willing you are to learn something new, or how open you are to change. These factors are far better predictors of vitality than any calendar. When we stop categorizing ourselves as too old or past our prime, we often rediscover abilities we assumed were lost, not because time reversed, but because limitation was never as absolute as we believed. The danger of rigid age labels is that they become self-fulfilling. When society tells us that aging equals decline, we comply without realizing it. We narrow our movements, simplify our routines, and lower our expectations. Mindlessness accelerates aging. Mindfulness slows it. Paying attention to novelty, variation, and possibility keeps the mind active, and an active mind sustains an active body. This does not mean denying time or pretending years have not passed. It means understanding that biology is responsive, not passive. Your cells are listening to how you live, how you think, and how you define yourself. When you approach life with awareness rather than assumption, you give your body new instructions. You invite resilience instead of resignation. So perhaps your birth certificate is not wrong in recording a date, but it is incomplete in telling your story. It captures when you were born, not how alive you are. It tells us nothing about your potential today. Aging is not a downward slope dictated by time. It is a process shaped moment by the way we engage with the world. From the moment we learn our age, we begin to learn our limits. Long before the body shows any sign of decline, the mind quietly absorbs expectations about what that number means. We are told when we should slow down, when learning becomes difficult, when energy should fade, and when ambition should soften. Over time, these ideas settle in so deeply that they begin to feel biological. But science reveals something far more powerful. Age starts as a belief long before it expresses itself as a physical reality. Consider how often people explain their choices using age as the reason. They stop running because they believe their joints are fragile. They avoid new skills because they assume their brain is no longer adaptable. They withdraw from opportunity because they feel time has already decided their capacity. The body listens closely to these signals. When the mind repeatedly tells the body to be cautious, to expect weakness, to anticipate decline, the body responds by conserving energy, tightening movement, and reducing resilience. What appears to be aging is often the result of obedience to belief. The mind does not simply observe the body, it interprets it. Sensations that would once be dismissed as temporary discomfort are now labeled as proof of aging. A forgotten name becomes evidence of cognitive decline rather than a moment of distraction. Fatigue becomes a permanent condition rather than a passing state. Each interpretation reinforces a story, and the story reshapes behavior. Over time, posture changes, reaction times slow, and confidence erodes, not because time demanded it, but because belief rehearsed it daily. Research consistently demonstrates that expectations alter performance. When individuals believe they are capable, they move differently, breathe differently, and engage more fully with their environment. Muscles activate more efficiently, attention sharpens, motivation increases. The body becomes more responsive simply because the mind has removed the brakes. This is not positive thinking in the superficial sense. It is the removal of unconscious constraints that were never biologically necessary to begin with. There is a subtle but critical difference between acknowledging time and surrendering to it. Time passes for everyone, but aging is shaped by how we relate to that passage. When people are placed in environments that remind them of vitality rather than decline, their physical responses change. Strength improves, flexibility increases, balance stabilizes. These changes occur without medication, without exercise programs, and without medical intervention. They occur because the mind has been given permission to operate without the weight of expectation. The most damaging aspect of age-related belief is not physical decline, but narrowed identity. People begin to define themselves by what they can no longer do instead of what they are still capable of becoming. This narrowing reduces curiosity, and curiosity is one of the most powerful predictors of vitality. When curiosity fades, engagement fades. When engagement fades, the body follows. The reverse is equally true. The moment curiosity is reintroduced, energy often returns, not as a miracle, but as a natural response to renewed mental activity. Belief also influences risk perception. When people think of themselves as old, they avoid challenge. They choose predictability over exploration. Yet challenge is essential for maintaining coordination, strength, and cognitive sharpness. Avoiding it creates the very fragility people fear. In contrast, those who view themselves as capable continue to test their limits. The body adapts because adaptation is what bodies are designed to do. What makes this realization so powerful is its immediacy. You do not need to wait for years to see its effect. The moment belief shifts, behavior changes. The moment behavior changes, the body receives new information. Aging is not something that suddenly begins at a certain age. It is something rehearsed through thought, expectation, and interpretation. When those rehearsals stop, the performance changes. The idea that age is primarily biological is comforting because it removes responsibility. But the idea that age is deeply influenced by belief is liberating because it restores agency. The mind is not a passive observer of the aging process. It is an active participant. When you recognize that, you begin to see age not as a sentence, but as a story, one that can be rewritten in real time. Most people believe aging happens because time passes, but a quieter force works alongside time, often unnoticed. The way we move through our days, the level of attention we bring to our experiences, and the degree to which we remain mentally engaged all shape how we age. When life becomes automatic, when days blur together and actions are repeated without awareness, the body begins to mirror that disengagement. Mindlessness does not feel dangerous, yet it steadily accelerates decline in ways that appear natural but are not inevitable. From the moment routines replace awareness, the brain reduces effort. Decisions are made by habit rather than intention. Movements become predictable and limited. The nervous system, designed to respond to novelty and challenge, receives fewer signals to adapt. Over time, this reduction in stimulation affects balance, coordination, memory, and energy. What looks like aging is often the body responding to a lack of mental engagement rather than to the passage of years. Mindfulness interrupts this process. It is not meditation in the traditional sense, nor is it a passive state of calm. It is the active practice of noticing differences, paying attention to variation, and engaging fully with the present moment. When people become mindful, they introduce novelty into experiences that once felt familiar. This simple shift increases cognitive activity, and increased cognitive activity sends a powerful message to the body: stay responsive. Research shows that when individuals are encouraged to notice new details in their environment, even subtle ones, their mental flexibility improves. This flexibility influences physical performance. Reaction times quicken, movements become more fluid, posture adjusts naturally. The body is not aging backward, but it is aging differently because it is no longer receiving signals of stagnation. There is a common assumption that slowing down is wise as we age. In reality, disengagement often masquerades as caution. When people stop paying close attention, they move less, explore less, and challenge themselves less. This creates a feedback loop in which reduced activity leads to reduced capacity. Mindfulness breaks this loop by restoring attention. When attention returns, movement becomes intentional again. Intention restores strength. Consider how often people say they feel older because their days feel repetitive. The brain thrives on difference. Without it, neural pathways weaken. With it, they strengthen. Mindfulness does not require drastic change. It requires noticing. Taking a different route, adjusting posture consciously, listening more carefully, or approaching a familiar task as if it were new, all activate mental processes that sustain vitality. These small acts accumulate into meaningful physiological effects. One of the most powerful aspects of mindfulness is that it redefines effort. When people are mindful, they do not experience challenge as threat. They experience it as information. This shift reduces stress responses that contribute to inflammation and fatigue. The body remains alert rather than defensive. Over time, this state supports better immune function, improved sleep, and greater energy. Aging slows not because time has stopped, but because the body is no longer bracing for decline. Mindfulness also reshapes identity. People who remain attentive see themselves as active participants in life rather than passive observers. This sense of agency influences behavior. They stand taller. They speak with more confidence. They move with purpose. These changes are subtle, yet they have profound effects on how the body functions and how others respond to them. Social engagement increases, and social engagement further supports cognitive and physical health. What makes mindfulness so compelling is its accessibility. It does not depend on physical ability, age, or circumstance. The moment attention increases, the process begins. The body responds immediately to the signals sent by an engaged mind. Aging is often described as an unstoppable force, but in many cases it is the cumulative effect of inattention. When people reclaim awareness, they reclaim adaptability. The mind stays flexible, and a flexible mind keeps the body capable. Time continues to move forward, but the experience of aging changes. The body remains responsive because it is continually reminded that it is needed, engaged, and alive. A single number has an extraordinary influence over how people live their lives. It appears on a document issued at birth, and from that moment forward, it quietly follows every decision, every expectation, and every assumption about what is possible. That number is treated as an authority, yet it measures only one thing: the amount of time that has passed since birth. It does not measure strength, curiosity, resilience, or adaptability, but people routinely allow it to define all of these qualities. The most subtle power of that number is not in what it states, but in what it suggests. It whispers rules about what should be easy and what should be difficult, what is appropriate and what is unrealistic. People begin to filter their ambitions through it. Opportunities are declined before they are tested. Desires are dismissed as impractical. Potential is quietly negotiated downward, not because the body has failed, but because a number has been granted authority it never earned. The body does not experience age in years, it experiences it in use. Muscles respond to demand, not to dates. The brain responds to challenge, not to chronology. When people remain engaged, curious, and willing to adapt, their physical and cognitive systems continue to respond accordingly. Yet the moment someone decides that a certain age signals limitation, behavior changes. Movement becomes cautious, exploration slows, effort is reduced. The body interprets this reduction as instruction and it adapts downward. There is a powerful illusion at work here. Decline is often attributed to age when it is actually the result of disengagement. People stop doing what once kept them capable, then point to the number as the cause. This reversal of cause and effect is rarely questioned. Once accepted, it becomes self-reinforcing. The fewer risks taken, the fewer capacities expressed. The fewer capacities expressed, the more convincing the story of limitation becomes. What science increasingly reveals is that potential is not something used up by time, but something maintained by use. When people challenge age-based assumptions, surprising changes occur. They move more freely. They learn faster than expected. They recover more quickly than predicted. These outcomes are often described as exceptions, yet they may simply be examples of what happens when expectations no longer suppress ability. The birth certificate does not record how you think, how you pay attention, or how you respond to novelty. These factors exert far greater influence on daily functioning than the number itself. When individuals shift their focus away from age and toward engagement, their bodies often respond with renewed capability. This response is not motivational fantasy. It is the nervous system doing what it is designed to do when it receives signals of relevance and demand. Another overlooked consequence of age labeling is social reinforcement. Society mirrors back expectations based on numbers. When individuals internalize those expectations, they begin to perform them. Speech patterns change, energy levels drop, confidence softens. Others respond accordingly, reinforcing the role. When someone refuses to conform to these cues, the interaction shifts. Energy is matched. Engagement increases. Identity expands beyond the number. The most compelling insight is that potential is not something that belongs to youth alone. Potential is a function of mindset, context, and attention. When people stop outsourcing their limits to a document, they begin to notice how many of those limits were never physical to begin with. The body, freed from unnecessary restraint, often exceeds expectations that once felt unquestionable. The number on a birth certificate can tell you when you entered the world, but it cannot tell you how fully you are participating in it. The moment you stop letting that number define your capacity, your behavior changes. When behavior changes, the body responds. And when the body responds, what once seemed like an immutable truth begins to reveal itself as an assumption that can be challenged in real time.